Today, Rinpoche continued his discussion on the stages of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. He paid special attention today to the Four Noble Truths: the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, and the truth of path. Enjoy.
Danga zo de ne man rona marwa
Ni jaje
la
ni jaje ribe
ni je dun rona mara ni je dun tama tin somba le wulia.
Oh, okay.
What the jiben ding saje do marwa on ru chen mara.
Okay. So today we will begin on page 267 in the English, and this is where just so everyone can get to where we are.
Oh, then my agent to judge in a teacher, Jibin da, Tomo Langes and Balujan or the J. Samajon or somebody Jibit, Tela Ludusawa, Tabat Dribble Langes, Argentina Pobas, Saji Jerota. Ta samba jang said what the Nanju samba jang with Marbe, Nanju samba. Nanju samba jang with the Jibit said, and then Nanju samba Jul Jibit. Nizan could Tabatunian law, Shona to the Nanju Jabal South to swing Zarwa. Then Tella Lutusa was that Nanju samba to the Nitugan lady, Shanju samba Yana Jagum to the Wulu. Tobajindua. What Tobase was a thing that Lodusa was that tabat driven larger than Tella Pobatella or the Godet Latin in the go somewhere. Yeah.
So this section, which is called Training the Mind in the Stage of the Past Shared in Common with Beings of Medium Capacity, begins with Lama Tsongkhapa's outline. And we find that there are four categories for the outline. First, the mental training. The second category, the measure of the determination to be free. Third category, clearing away misconceptions. And the fourth category of ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So these four categories, in a condensed way, mean the following. And Rinpoche said it's good that we're going over this again. So we've already gone through this and we're going over it again. So the first category, the mental training, refers to renunciation, the determination to be free. The second category, the measure of the determination to be free, refers to how does one measure in one's continuum if the determination to be free is present or if renunciation is present. And then we find in Lama Tsongkhapa's smaller poem, The Three Principal Paths, where we find a quote that explains what the measure of that attitude is exactly. And it says, I'll read the two lines into this. By constant meditation, your mind will not entertain a moment's wish even for the successes of life. And then here we have, and you will aim for freedom all day and night. Then you experience transcendent renunciation. So this is how you measure if the renunciation is present in the continuum or in the mind. It means that if it is present, then you are aiming for liberation, for freedom, day and night. So that's the category number two. The third category, dispelling misconception, is a misconception that is gone over later on in the text. that is presented at times by those who believe that the hearers are the only ones who actually engage in the practice of renunciation, that the bodhisattvas do not engage in this practice. So this is the misconception that's cleared away in this third category, and that's related to the developing renunciation and the practitioners who can actually develop it. So the misconception is that this is really a hearer's practice. So the fourth category, ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation, refers to the truth of cessation and the truth of path. So we find the presentation of those two of the Four Noble Truths in that section. Digsun Rinpoche.
This one. Ta tombo what the samba jang de la taba de ju long wo zo ni de do taba de ju long wo zo ta de ji bi ta ni sa ji ni de ne an taba de ju long wo zo so wo de le ne ji mu ji ne sa ji ji ro wa ja ji bi de le sa ji son de wo do sa ji son ne taba wo zo was de ne taba de ya tene taba tene lunga lunga nibache tene taba tene lenyo jindo chebal shibal maya yesa taba dundo ba ponga marbe son dine o tenga tsonga ru chinsaro ta nga zo de tejebi tausa den ro mara tejebi ta tenas taba tene je lojebi taba dunye jibi tala ni dunye tang kunju guna samba tang tende yun la junyi guna samba wos taba dunye lo jibi tala ni re do ni ma re tena taba dunye jibi tala ni dunye da kunju guna samba tang tende yun la junyi guna samba ngenju samba jaya ge sandu karatang warasana dunye da kunju guna samba ne ane ngayru samba chingwa yak chi yuwa res tende yola junyi yuwa ne kuwa kuyu chu san ta ne ane ngayru samba chayage wadi tashi ni yuwa res wada tauso sa
Dene sache tambo jayan sheba ewa sum
tambo teimba taba ngozwa sa ma taba tunyi lu ngozwa
de sum
taba tunyi lu ngozwa te
sum
lari chiba kuru chirwa
lesa
telin jaji be saji sun de
okay saudu
taba ngozwa taba tunyi lu ngozwa taba dundu ba bombas wadi saji sun de te naulu del tense sun de do
tu chena
yeah
so this first category, the mental training, which is referring to the determination to be free or renunciation, we find there are two categories here. First, identifying the mind intent on liberation and the method for developing the mind intent on liberation. So the first category, identifying the mind intent on liberation, we find that there is just one category here that Lama Tsongkhapa presents. But when we look at Jayan Sheba's commentary, we find that there are actually three categories that he shows. First, actual liberation. Second, the mind seeking it, so the mind that seeks actual liberation. And then what is abandoned while seeking liberation. So these are the three categories that are presented by Jayan Sheba. And then the second category, the method for developing the mind intent on liberation, we find two categories presented by Lama Tsongkhapa. First, reflection on suffering and its origin, and then the second category of reflection from the viewpoint of the 12 links of dependent origination, or the 12 dependent arisings. So if one reflects on suffering and its origin, one will develop the mind intent on liberation. If one reflects on the viewpoint of the 12 dependent arisings, one will be able to develop the mind intent on liberation. So this is the point of that part. Digsun Che.
Ta taba duni tajibi taudala den lani kunu saji ka ni leong kana jiduwa. O ji nyo de ban rabu do den o de nyo re mu do de anja ji bo de nyo kong ja ga mu do. Ta tajibi taungwa so o de ni ba de taungwa dres. Ni ba ta tajibi tabat dönye jibi ta ngönse wote nibat ngöne to wotres
Lesa.
tala dönge da kunyu kone samba ta tende yela junyu kone samba ni marbe
Lesa.
tende yela junyu kone samba ni je dönge da kunyu kone samba ne ngaju samba je ya taji ji ware yela junyi tende yela junyu kone khoku chu samba le ane ngaju samba ji taujuni yores
Lesa.
ta tombo dönge da kunyu kone samba tala tombo tala ni je doden kuyu nyemi samba ta kunyu kuyu jore samba
Lesa.
sajini re do doden kuyu nyemi samba ta kunyu kuyu jore samba wajanga so lari doden nyemi sala mambe na taba dönye jiri me jishi kunyu kuyu jore ma sana kuyu zawa jusi me shibe sili nganju jushe tenpa ta kowa kanki shiba shiba oda tenpa dusha yin samarbe
Lesa.
rendu wata
Lesa. So developing the mind the method for developing the mind intent on liberation has two categories. First, reflection on suffering and its origin, to have the arisal of renunciation or the mind intent on liberation, and then reflection from the viewpoint of the 12 dependent arisings. So by reflecting on the 12 links of dependent origination, one can develop or have the arisal of the mind intent on liberation or renunciation. So the first category, reflection, so this is the real method, the actual method for developing this realization. So this is the actual method or the real method. So the reflection on suffering and its origin, there are two categories: reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and then reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of origin. So we find very similar, we don't find anything different presented in Jayan Sheba's commentary at this point. Reflection on suffering and its origin is important, and reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin is important because of the point made in the abbreviated stages of the path. The Lamrim Duden. It says, if you do not make an effort to think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. If you do not consider the stages whereby true origins of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious circle. Therefore, you should cherish exuding total disgust and renunciation of such existence, while knowing which factors bind you to its wheel. I, the yogi, have practiced just that. If you would also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So this is from the abbreviated stages of the path, and this shows you the importance of these two categories. Dixon.
ta nombo dogen da kunyu kone samba tala ni re doa tombo doden deji doden kuyu nyeme samba ta kunyu kuyu nyore samba ni je ta tombo doden kuyu nyeme samba tala ni doden deji Thomas sombe kuba temba ta dogen gomba ngo saje ni digdoa doden deji Thomas sombe kuba ta Demba jadal dogen demba kunu demba ngoden landes dambi chuchi dan tene wote ko tombun te adin bare dogen demba kunu demba ngoden landes denje jemba te la jule ji jemba yins la jule ji tada jita ngodu rins la jule ji jembe wont jene an dogen demba kunu demba ngoden landes sombe jemba to wotres ko jeba ko so ne jig rimba de jundi tunji rimba res judan la da donga da ngobala no korinjins judan la da josana kunyu de ba joro ta tene la de kunyu de ba juje tene la de ngoden tu biju mar judan la da josana donga kunyu de ba de donga de bi judan la de ngoden tu biju Goden tu jode do jodan la da tan do rebin de jodan la da Judan Lada, Dungan, Gobalan Guris, Tan Debo Dungan Dembate, Gunu Debi Jebo, and then Goden de Lada Jebo. What the Jundi Tunjin, but so Shiba goes what the
So the first category, reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence. There are two categories, showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the four truths, and then the actual meditation on suffering. So the presentation here is the same as the first chapter of Lord Maitreya's Abhisama Alamkara, where it speaks of the established truths. And in that section, we find the order the same again. So we first find the first truth, the truth of the superior truth of suffering, and then the superior truth of origin, then the superior truth of cessation, and then superior truth of path. So this is the presentation according to how one actually practices these truths, the stages of practice of these truths. So this is how the first chapter of Abhisama Alamkara presents it. In the fourth chapter, we find the presentation according to cause and effect. And in that chapter, it says the cause, the path, the suffering, is the cessation. So here, cause is referring to the truth of origin, path referring to truth of path, suffering, truth of suffering, and cessation, the truth of cessation. And this is according to cause and effect. So we first have the cause, which is referring to origin, being in that first category, because this is the category of causes, and that links to, in the category of effects, that first effect, which is the truth of suffering, or suffering as it's presented in Abhisama Alamkara. And then the second truth in this order of cause and effect would be truth of path, and that links with the truth of suffering that is arisen from it, that arises from it. So this is the presentation of the Four Noble Truths according to cause and effect. But this presentation that is about to be given is according to the stages of how one would practice these truths. So that's the point here. Diksun.
다 동행되면 대지 토마스는 동행되면 군주되면 고대라 됐을 와 동어도 줄지 심벌에 대 사지가 소바나지 태그레스 태비 주생 가르스나 롱기 두제다 리비 두지니 요레스 롱기 두제데 네 동행되면 군주되면 고대라 됐을 다바인 태데 네 자샤만 배 줄라말레 네네 시자 네 준의 본자를 되네 도자 맨날 담바샤와터 Dungan Judan Tangu Patan Tenzin La, Sheja Poja Riba She Temba She Zombe Long Do Yores, Long Do. And the Woodel Tariba, Riba Dua, Niyundua. Alla Naso Tambur, Mamudu, the old Telegua. The Dungan the Bakunju, the Wodan La Desomba, they were there, Tebi Duji, the Long Dujitan, Ribi Dujini Undua. What the Long Duji, Jashambi, Long the Red, Jashambi Long. 어때 ndole somba 어때 다가나 태그서 자샤마게 어때 내내 시자 동안 되면 내단 자와레스 군주 되면 내 주단 자와 어때 손 자샤미 로도도와 는 올면 땅다고 두바용도와
Lessa. 공겨 매비.
어때 칼레 산타는 그 칼레로 차원지래
So now there'll be, and we'll find two presentations that are given that show how one would present these truths. So the presentation of the Four Noble Truths that is accompanied by scripture, or scripture, is the first category, and there we find a quote from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum, where it says, "Recognize that you are ill, eliminate the cause of the illness, attain health, rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively." So this is the proof, according to Scripture, of this order. So we find the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, and the truth of path. And this order is presented in the Sublime Continuum. And then later in the text we find the order the proof of order relying on analysis or dhyanda, correct signs, correct proofs. So that's the second way of looking at them. Diksun.
Tambula ni doden kui nyeme sabatala ni doden denji Thomas on bi goba temba aje ana doden gombo ngo saji ni digdwa o de ta tambo ngaso doden denji Thomas on bi goba de yongro ta o doden gomba tel nalu le doden je samba tro samba son samba de yongdo ta o de kale. So
the category reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, has two categories, showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the four truths, so showing the order, the presentation of order of the Four Noble Truths, of truth of suffering, origin, cessation, and path. And then the actual meditation on suffering, then we look at the various types of suffering, the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, the 3 types of suffering. Diksun.
Doden denji Thomas on be goba tambo ne srwa doden de ba denji Thomas on be goba karresna tambo ne kunjun ne jodan doden ne tin jebu yimbe kunjun hala doden shwa yinas ji shir joden deje denji reba teta mutba ne junde denji reba teta mutba ko jiban sumba najin teta mutba ane klon tanden dongen pabi denba onde ne kunju pabi denba sheson jenas deje reba teta son jusen karres soba ko marbe son jenas tela odet tatel ne ngurole soba ko ne soba tel tela tembe junde jirimba ne ko jibal tembe jotan la ta denga shizuji junde jirimba le dote denji jirimba somba la nyalen jine chimbu yebe jume dos ote denga de bakunu de bangoten la de son jabatele nyalen jinga chibu yowaris ngodu jula jirimba res tada jeta ngoturins ote goba chibu yoza ote duden kunjun nge da duden shugu ina ya duden denji Thomas on bala jyo mares land la dudu da jeba ni na du la dudu timbare tela tembe junde jire bale dote son bala nyalen jene shebe yebe jyo metos la dudu jine son adoteres ta
lesson. So the first category, showing the significance of the Buddha asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the four truths. So quam. The true origins are the causes and true sufferings are their effects. Why then did the Bhagavan reverse that order? If the origins precede sufferings and say, monks, this is the noble truth of suffering, this is the noble truth of the origin. So then we have a response. So this is asking why this wasn't presented in a cause and effect way, the way we find that 4th chapter of the Abhisalamkara presenting it. So then the response is, or the reply, in this case, the teacher reversed in the sequence of cause and effect, not out of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice. So this is the condensed response. So in this response section, there are 2 categories: the condensed response, and then the kind of broader response, or the expanded response is what we usually use. So the summary, or the condensed response, and then the expanded response. So in this case, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect not out of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice. So this is the condensed response. So it's very important for practicing that this order was presented in the way that it was. Digsum Rinpoche.
What the land of the Dujitan, Geshe Lharampa, Janjibe, what the song there, watch of the war. Tell Tembe, Junji Bale Dote, Sombala de Yana, Chemo Yube, Jumetos, Jeremy, land of Dujitan, somebody is.
So in Jayan Sheva's commentary, we find these two categories of the summary or condensed, and then the expanded or broader explanation. So this response, in this case, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect not out of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice, is the condensed point, or this summarized point. I guess summarized response.
This way. Oh, yeah. Jumetos, and what the danger could the Jundi Ballad do there, Sombala, the Nyalanji Champions, the Junior Maris, Land Religion Sombaris. That Jundi Ballad do there, Sombala Nyalanji Champions, Nyalanji Champions, you are now. Tell my Jebashi Mores, they are Ganshin and the Tas, Nyalanji Champions, you send the Ta. Dujarani la Toma coalition Tandu Shinji Malubashi Majena Zawachebe Tabajetatis and the Dujarani Toma Koala Tanduji and Shenlu Shinji Maluba Tabak Nanu Samba Shinji Maluba Majena and Tabatria Zawat Chevere and the Candace Chegors Chetu Mares. Deji Tuma Masuna, Dunga Deji Tuma Masuna, what the Tabatunit, what the Tuning Juma Maya Chetu Mares, Juma Tuba in Susan, Dujas Chetu Maracandas Chigures, Chetatis, Tena, Jusen Tishana, Toma Duja Maribi, maybe Dine, Maribi, maybe Dujan. Marib me te konani la maribata lende la mu maribi dine ku pensu dunga wala dewanjin du wares ku pensu dunga wala dewanjin be le shinji logi hebes ku pensu dunga wa yimbala ne dunga wa mayimban zebe ne dewanjin be shinji logi lote ne duja le deres las ane tesu sondu sana jejapale denge jasudala tha naba kuntu yemenas ku denge jasudala ane toni matuna an denge debi shimi thade yemares naba kuntu yemena toni matuna ane denzil no tugumare denzil manuena denzil debo leda Nyomobal no to Mare, T. Jabudunge, Pontu Mares, what is a Marba? They are conscious that over a Jijapales, Dunge Jasutala Ta, Nabakun to Yemina, Dunge Jasutala, and a Tuni Matuna, Dunge Tat Nabakun to Yomares. She shouldn't then Shimala, Shebachu, Suju, and a Kui Jasunal, Shimba, Kui Jasuna. Rombatala and Shigum, Karchin Shigumudus, Jibachine, Jiminjuro, Sheson Batar, what they Ayade Longres, Ayande was Mundus, Sheson Batar. Then they asked about what about Chidonjana.
So now we then have the expanded response, the broader response. Why, if his disciples failed to develop a proper determination to liberate themselves from cyclic existence, they would sever the very root of liberation. How then could he lead them to liberation? Thus, in the beginning, the darkness of ignorance enshrouded his students. They mistook the wonders of cyclic existence, which in fact are suffering, for happiness. So, in this expanded response, we find out what happens if the students do not develop this determination to liberate themselves. If this determination to liberate oneself isn't present, then liberation is not possible. So it says they would sever the very root of liberation. So without this determination to be free, or this renunciation, liberation isn't possible. How then could he lead them to liberation? Thus, in the beginning, the darkness of ignorance enshrouded his students. So there's two different categories of ignorance: ignorance of karma and its results, and then ignorance of the nature of reality. So it says, because the darkness of ignorance enshrouded his students, in the beginning, the darkness of ignorance, so these different types of ignorance of cause and effect and the nature of reality, has caused them to see that which is actually suffering as happiness. This ignorance causes a grasping at things which are the grasping at things as they are forms of happiness, but they are actually forms of suffering. So this is a mistaken idea, or a mistaken view that grasps at things which are suffering as forms of happiness. Then we find a quote from Aryadeva's 400 verses or 400 stanzas that says, "Fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid?" So this is stating that if there isn't a realization of emptiness, of the nature of reality, then it's not possible to get rid of the grasping at true establishment. And if the grasping at true establishment is left unharmed, then the karma and the afflictions are left unharmed. And if the karma and afflictions are left unharmed, then you necessarily have suffering, because the karma and afflictions bring about suffering. So it's saying here, if you don't have this realization, how can you not be scared? Because without this realization, you're definitely going to be reborn. So there will be no end whatsoever to this ocean, and to this ocean of suffering. So it's not possible to end cyclic existence without this realization. Geshe Rinpoche.
다지단도 그 콜 투미타도 타미타스 니로로다 콜 투미타요 말이스 저항하마디 고 저항하마 어디 토마자요 말이스 투미타요 말이스 투미타면 네 코하기 타미타요 말이스 투미 죄전 타마탄데 바스 코 타미타데 네 돈이 공부를 되는데 어디 덴지다 레다 녀모부터 되게 본소나 아니 그 what the shita what it is shita duaris
Shita sena?
shimita neslen kumarbe what the shimita you tome jojan tamatan tembas call it tamita you are tomita you mares what the jingen would water jejabel no to go what the nabakun to yemena son the shimita du mares what the calling gundua shimita mentionally woman shimita yusuru tome joja tamatan de bas tamita yuaris tamita mebata ne jejabes de jasu de la ta 나바군도 예매나 셰송베스 나나 돈이 마두나 콜시다 메시비도나 마두 콜시다 요아레스 호텔로 마시노도 추운도다
Bene the ngama the long gar
토메 주제 담았다데 뭐도 베체 도이나 나네는 진지래
Then tome
주제 콜 토마요 말레스
lesser
담았다데 담아요 아레스
lesser okay
담았다데 버스
lesser
어디다 타미타요 말서 이제베 논들 고아들내 우도하다
lesser
어때 돈이 마두는 타요 마시비도 마두 콜 타요 아레스
lesser
어때 라시 우도하다
So when we look at the 400 stanzas without understanding it, one could say there is no end to cyclic existence because Aryadeva states that, fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid? So then the response would be that this is referring to those who have not realized emptiness. That if one has not realized this emptiness, there is no end whatsoever. In the sutra teachings, we find that the Buddha asserted that cyclic existence does not have a beginning, but it has an end. It has an end because one can get rid of the grasping at true establishment, and therefore get rid of the karma and afflictions, and therefore get rid of the suffering that they produce. Get rid of the suffering that they produce, or which is cyclic existence, or korwa. There is an end, but there is not a beginning. But there is no end if one hasn't realized emptiness. So that's implicitly meant within the 400 verses. So we have to analyze it, because one could respond and say that there is no end to cyclic existence, because Aryadeva said so, by misinterpreting what was meant, or the pith of the meaning here. So one could say there is no end to cyclic existence, because Aryadeva says, "Fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering," and one needs to be able to understand that there is no end to this ocean of suffering if there is not a realization of emptiness. But there is an end to the ocean of suffering. There is an end to cyclic existence. But there is an end to cyclic existence. Decent.
Kui pensu tu nga lo yang daba na dewa mares dungen lo dungen wa saji tangje dungen was dungen wa ina dungen ma cha dungen ina dungen wa ima cha ma cha wa te toban do ta dungen ta dungen wa la chaba ko maso yi ma ji ne ta se ta ba ina dungen wa ina dungen ba cha ma cha na kui du saji ge do yo ro to so nga lo dungen wa re dungen ma yi Dunga mai doa in becher. Dunga in a soa dunga in ures. What the passion to do?
That's go Rinpoche. Then the Dungyal dan Dungyal wa musun. Then
Dunga dan Dunga wala musun imagine.
Okay.
What the sun dobadu.
Okay, dobadu. Then
Dunga wa in a dunga in achumacho. Kui doa chuji. Kui doa dunga wa in the saji in becher. Saji tangje dungen was.
Koro dewa chuchen?
Kui doa yo nga zomel doa.
Koro dewa chuchen.
Kui doa de ane dungen ayi mai. Dungen yin ba to dungen wa yin bejer. Chaba ma yo. Dungen wa yin saji yin bejer. Dungen ma yin de ane doa yin bejer. Choa doa yin bejer. Choa doa yin shan. What the zul doba doa da.
Soa dewa yin cha. Okay. So then, when we look at the two categories, we're going to use for our purposes here. I'm going to choose these two words, suffering and pain. And in Tibetan, we have Dungyal and Dungyalwa. And it's really translated as both words are translated as suffering usually. But when we look at the actual Tibetan and the meaning, those two words don't mean the same thing. So we have to find two words, even though it's some kind of the same word, in order to present it and for us to be able to understand it. So I'm going to use the words suffering and pain. Rinpoche said that if we look at these two categories, suffering and pain, how many permutations would we find, or possibilities? Would there be 3 or 4? And we have to have a doubt in our minds and wonder if it is suffering, is it necessarily pain? And we would say this happiness of cyclic existence, for instance, the subject, the happiness of cyclic existence, is it suffering? Yes. Is it pain? And we would say, well, no, it's not pain, because we have a happy feeling or a happy, happy feeling. Therefore, it's not pain. So a doubt arises when we look at these two words and try to see how we would compare them. So we find this the becha gari yire the musum the Chenrezig parshin.
Anh sáng chú xem bảo chú mỹ dân bảo tang lá bảo dân bảo tang ya, tôi tôi sul đông ai yu, sáng xem bảo chú. Anh mỹ tang lá bảo tang con bảo ban, sát chế ni dân bảo tang tôi sul đông ai yu, tôi đông ai chú je đông ai nó khoai yin cũng mà được à.
The probably Shansen Kashi the Korwa yin.
Khoa bung chakin lo de dân bảo tang yu je.
Okay. The Korwa, the Sa Gupi Shanchu Semba. Chu Chen.
Sa Jebi Shanchu Semba. Le sát dân bảo tang yu rồi. tôi đông ai yu me, le chua đông ai tôi tu ban đồ ta. tôi đông ai mà khoa mà be chứ. Nó mà chỉ là đồ.
Dungyao yin.
Dungyao Dungyao.
Dungyao yin, Dungyao mayin. Dungyao mayin.
Dungyao mayin the sajik do ang so me do do. Khalasa do do. Rijal do. What the do ro da. Dungyao yin the sajik be. Sajik ta Dungyao.
So the Buddha stated that all contaminated phenomena are suffering. So when we would go back to that point of cyclic existence, it is suffering because it's a contaminated phenomena. Then if we looked at the reversal and we would say, is that which is pain necessarily suffering? So if we're looking at it in terms of 3 or 4 permutations, it's necessary to find out what pervades what. Or if one doesn't necessarily always pervade the other. So that's the point of this exercise as a note. So if it is pain, is it necessarily suffering? So if you say, no, it's not necessarily suffering, you would say posit an example which shows that, and you would say an 8th ground bodhisattva who cuts off his or her arms out of generosity and gives them, or cuts out his or her eyes out of generosity. So we find these examples of the bodhisattva being so generous to give their arm or give an eye to someone. Would this be pain? There is a feeling of pain present, but would it be suffering? Well, it's not contaminated because the bodhisattva on the 8th ground, the Arya bodhisattva, the superior bodhisattva by the 8th ground has abandoned cyclic existence. So it is not cyclic existence, and therefore it's not contaminated, so therefore it's not suffering. So this is how you would analyze this and why doubts can arise, because these examples can be given to show why one wouldn't necessarily pervade the other, why one wouldn't necessarily pervade the other. Then Dungyao Wa Yin, Dungyao, the Rinpoche, Dungyao Yin, Dungyao Wa Ma Yin?
Dungyao Yin, Dungyao Yin Ma就是那上山杀劫报是命人嘛当喇叭的下班人嘛当有了。但是Dungyao有错的Dungyao，原来我都考验是了一个马路的，Dungyao马路，Dungyao的。
Then the Dungyao dan the Yena Dungyao Wa。
因为马叫了我们路上他多吧的多吧。
The Shansen, then Dungyao Wa, then Dungyao Yin Cha, the
Dungyao Yin那Dungyao Yin马叫了的，我就错的完多，看了。
Okay, the Lapsa. Okay, Ninge Yabu Lapsum, Dixon. Selbo Lapsum.
Oh yeah.
Okay, go get me a sheet.
Jija bale Dungyao Jasun de la ta, na ba kun de yume, na ba 타 유에면서 어디 시탈 고고도 하다 코알 시타 매스 라스나 안 도매 주제 담아다다 코알 시타 유에서 하던 게도 와 어디 시타 매스 하다 가르스나 돈이 마도나 코알 시타 매시 되레스 예메나 시춘드는 신와라 지바진 지문주로스 셰송바다르드네 야다바나 도와마 쿠이편수 네 마달 하이 도와두수 그걸로 야다반 도와마르 두겐로스 두겐와레스 레뉴지와젠레스 시든 두덴지나바 토마 손네 주와지 그바 두덴지나바 토마 손네 주와지 코알은 야반 주행 안주 삼바지 그베 동네 데모 토마 손소스 주센도 워터레스 인사 마르바.
So then, again, the 400th stanza says, "Fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid?" We have to say that there is actually a way to end cyclic existence. And this line is referring to those who have not realized emptiness. Without realizing emptiness, there is no end whatsoever to the ocean of suffering. There is no end to cyclic existence. Then Lama Tsongkhapa states, by saying, in fact, this cyclic existence is not happiness but suffering, the Buddha explained many forms of suffering and led his disciples to become disenchanted with cyclic existence and recognize it as suffering. As this is a necessary precondition, the Buddha spoke first about the truth of suffering. So in the higher realms of cyclic existence, we would think that we were experiencing forms of happiness, but these experiences are not happiness, they are suffering, because they arise possessing karma and afflictions. So their arisal, it's more like their arisal is influenced by karma and afflictions, or possessing would be more literal, I believe, but possessing the karma and afflictions. So this is the reason why it is suffering. And not happiness, because this experience arises from karma and afflictions. So the Buddha explained many forms of suffering and led his disciples to become disenchanted with cyclic existence and recognize it as suffering. So recognizing that all forms of cyclic existence are necessarily suffering. Diksun.
샹센 바바도서 비지 샹신 바바도서 샤지는 지마탄와라 대화 처비 요소 대화 녀투스 고비 탈론 대화 요로 시탈론네 시탈 냐바잔 녀투스 대화 요더보다 어떤 나지 샹주선 바도 샤바네 지마탄와라 샹주선 대화 처비 와르스
소아 대화
대화
Okay.
대화 요소 와르다
When we look at this example of the Arya Bodhisattva, 8th ground Arya Bodhisattva, giving his or her limbs or eyes or parts of the body away, we also see that there is a great joy or happiness that accompanies this generosity for the Bodhisattva. So we would see that when we would use this as an example, as something that's pain, we could counter that or by saying, well, it isn't, because the Arya Bodhisattva is experiencing great bliss or joy when engaging in generosity, just as the hearer who catches the Rinpoche, the Nyentu, the Mebong. Oh, okay. So the hearer's practitioner, foe destroyer, sits in this nirvana, this abiding in nirvana, and is experiencing this great bliss constantly at all times. He or she is experiencing this bliss at all times. So we'll take. So we have doubts about these two words, suffering and pain.
다 제자발에 동에 자투들라 타 나바군도 예메서 셰탈 고고도 셰타 너 고알 셰타 매스나 토메 타마타데 타마 유에서데 what the getting to and then shut up mess at the colors and not only Matun Shedameship nowadays. Tony Matun Daziponto Mare, Nyomoponto Mare, and Leponto Mabonte Quadro ah. She shouldn't see one land, but Jenny Jim and Joroshes on Batara, then I had Tabana, the Omai Jikupanto. Do my doing laws, doing laws, that doing in a doing how in a doing batcho. Doing in a doing how in batcho with the Tubandua. Ah, Tapon and Hijikundul, Hijik doing all I mean, Hijikundu, doing it just ah. So, Sijit doing all I mean, love compassion won't do. And what the Chenmo Jiba Jungu is, what the Sutubadu ah.
The Shamba don Ninji.
Hijigundu could do you can't tell Hijiguru. Do you can't mean to the Chenmo Jiba Juja.
Okay.
Hijigundu doing church, doing ai, Koi. And what the Shantu sang when a gun load on Saint Dunga, or Dunga to call me, what the Tubadu ah.
Load on Sem Gewa Ale, Shanchu
Shantu
Samba.
sang, Tony Gon, what the Gene, load on Saint Gun Euro. What the call me, what the Tubadu.
Oh. Salamambo. Okay, so when we look again at the 400 stanzas, fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid? It seems to contradict the previous, what the Buddha stated about cyclic existence having no beginning but having an end. And it does not contradict it because it implicitly is referring to those who have not realized emptiness. Because if one has not realized emptiness, then one can't get rid of the grasping at true establishment. If the grasping at true establishment hasn't been gotten rid of, then the afflictions haven't been, and then the karma hasn't been, and therefore, since the karma and afflictions haven't been abandoned or extinguished, there is necessarily cyclic existence. We have to say that this is referring to those who have not realized this emptiness. So then it says, by saying, in fact, the cyclic existence is not happiness but suffering, the Buddha explained many forms of suffering and led his disciples to become disenchanted with cyclic existence and recognize it as suffering. And this is necessarily a necessary precondition. The Buddha spoke first about the truth of suffering. When comparing this words, and they're just using suffering in the body of the text, but when we compare these two words that we're using, suffering and pain, we'll find that there are differences, or there may be differences, and we begin to doubt whether or not there are. So if are there 3 or 4 possibilities or permutations? Are they mutually exclusive or synonymous? We would say, for example, the subject, when somebody sees suffering, and when a bodhisattva sees suffering, for instance, he or she generates love and compassion. At that time, there's isn't there an unpleasant moment of the mind when he or she realizes or recognizes another being is suffering? Which would then move them to want to free them. So isn't there a time where the mind has been made unpleasant in the bodhisattva by the suffering that he or she is witnessing? And is that then pain? So here are more examples that we have to think about when we compare these two subjects together, of suffering and pain. And then we also have to take into account that it is stated that all of the actions of a bodhisattva's body and mind are virtue. That's also stated in texts. So then we have to just analyze this according to what we know of these points. So the feeling of pain, the feeling of happiness, bodhisattvas, etc., etc. So we have to look at all of these points in order to understand these subjects.
Nanganju samba tu yong ala dengen ji naba toma song ne ane sen le ma ji ba wo de jua je gu re nganju samba je gu ba yin so song wo de de den toma song yong re s gu ba de res naba toma song ne jua je gu be dengen ji den ba toma song so os wo de gu ba de res de ba.
So the reason that the Buddha spoke first of the truth of suffering is so that disciples could become disenchanted with cyclic existence, so that disciples could generate renunciation or desire to definitely emerge. So this is the reason why this truth of suffering is presented first when we look at these the truths according to practice. It's so that disciples can wish to definitely emerge or have the determination to be free from cyclic existence because of recognizing that it is suffering. So that is the reason for the truth of suffering being first.
ribat ngazul chenja ngores so shiro pe ngores shiro dia pine what the pe shia de shiro de sul jane shiro pe ngores.
So this section is slightly difficult when we look at it, but by going through it again and again, we're allowing Lama Tsongkhapa's words to influence our own minds so that our wisdom increases. So we're this is the reason for going through this again and again, is for the increase of our own wisdom by our minds being influenced by Lama Tsongkhapa's wisdom.
tela taban doba nas ta dungel ne su mo so ne dungel gabe yo marwa dungel tandu samba yuan na ane dungel do de dungel men na nya be samba tanje dungel ma ba zo tu mares dungel jute kare ina juta ji dan goris juta ji dan ne jut me ba zo tu na ne dungel ma ba zo tu ro te zo dungel jute kunju le tu ares te wo tu kunju sun go teres ta kensi ta tebi tu chonsuna ane ngasu nasal gabe yo marwa nasal gabe me du nasal men na nya be samba tanje nasal du nasal de jukari me de penhan dun taji jine dadage wo de nasal judel me ta ne wo de nasal me ba zo de da bin samara.
So the next deals with the origin of suffering. So once we understand the nature of suffering, or understand exactly what suffering is, we will not want it. But just by having this wish or to not have suffering or not wanting to have suffering isn't enough. This doesn't make the suffering go away, just wanting it to. We have to look at what the cause of the suffering is and then abandon that in order for the suffering to go away. Just like if we have an illness, for instance, we're diagnosed with cancer or tuberculosis, we would go to a doctor. It wouldn't just go away because we thought we want to be free from tuberculosis or free from cancer. This thought wouldn't make that go away. It would be necessary to go to the doctor, get a diagnosis, and for the doctor to say, this is what's causing the illness, this is what's causing your condition, and this is the medicine you take in order to get rid of the condition that you have. So it's a similar process. Once we understand what suffering is, and we want to be free from it, we have to find out what's causing it in order to figure out how to become free from it. So that's why the second truth is the truth of origin, because once you understand the truth of suffering, you'll want to get rid of it, and you can't get rid of it without knowing what causes it. Knowing what causes it and getting rid of what causes it. So the reason for debating is to increase your wisdom. You have all of these ideas that you're using to increase your wisdom in the process. So you have other people's ideas and your own ideas, and you're using this interaction to increase your own wisdom. And that's the best way. So this is what debating is for. By thinking of something a lot, your wisdom increases. By thinking of it a lot. So this is the point about origin that Lama Tsongkhapa makes. Once you recognize suffering, you see yourself as submerged in an ocean of suffering, and realize that if you want to be liberated from suffering, you must counteract it. Moreover, you recognize that you cannot stop suffering unless you counteract its cause. By investigating the cause of suffering, you come to understand its true origin. Consequently, the Buddha spoke next about the truth of origin. So this reason is presented for this is the reason why the truth of origin is the second truth. I forgot this from before. This is the reason why the truth of origin is the second truth. And if we look at this presentation, we can understand all of the other presentations. If we understand this, what this means, we can understand all of the other presentations of the first and second superior truths. In other texts, if we understand this.
Leji jeba tan kuyu dunga jukangal jeba san saji lel jeba res kuyu dunga de saji legen jeba res saji lel jeba res leji jeba tans le de jukangal den shwar san le de nyomo be ju jeba den jeba res le ja nyomo ji jeba tans ta nyomo ji tawa de dadun jeba danzi de shebi kunyu demba sheba jejin danzi ya dudu ne batwana ne dongen gabe goba ngodu shawa edan chayuti wodo gobe demba somba reso oda sheba jile gwa sheba ji saji wodongen zuka saji le debre saji le nyomo debre nyomo tsawa and dadunzi ba chuno deba drubazu denzi shebe kunyugi demba sheba jishins danzi du neba tuana wade danzi du neba tuni duba lezen danzi du neba tuana and dungen gabi goba ngodu shawa yedan chayuti wudu ne and dungen dembi wudu lezen 고된 손에 아무도 와스 가지지가 도바지로 단도수 도바도 도바 고된 고비대amba 손소스 고비대amba 손소사 고비대amba 손소나 도된 temba na taba ale gobi대amba 손바레스로와 tena ona dongen temba na taba tenye jeluchi na dongen temba wudung goden ote uma tsoba uma tere do ona se ona se ta nga so pesa so kaji nar se de to jibare do ta kaji nar pashin tu so kaji nar se ona se do tsobare do kaji nar se so ona
some a few
doden temba na tabala dobaji doden ju wodo gobi temba somba resos an doden temba wodel tene 고된 손에 아무도 왔어.
맞아.
도된 손발라된 타바드니로 제가 왔어. 대고든 고된 손에 아무도 왔어. 줘봐. 셰나 줘봐지. 안에 대고 저밀래로. Yeah.
So I'll just continue to read. Next, you developing understanding of the truth of the origin and understanding that contaminated karma produces the suffering of cyclic existence, that afflictions produce karma, and that the conception of self is the root of the afflictions. When you see that, you can eliminate the conception of self. You will vow to realize its cessation, which is also the cessation of suffering. Thus, the Buddha spoke next about the truth of cessation. And then it gets into a debate about points of order. So if you have contaminated karma, then that has been produced by afflictions. And then if you have these afflictions, those have been produced by the conception of the self to be truly established. So the conception of phenomena, conception of the self as being truly existent, as being truly established. So this grasping is what brings about the afflictions. The afflictions bring about the contaminated karma, and then that brings about cyclic existence. So one can get rid of the contaminated karma by getting rid of the afflictions, which are gotten rid of by getting rid of the misconception of self. So it is this misconception of self that is at the root of cyclic existence. So it says the reason for the Buddha talking about the truth of cessation in the third category is when you see that you can eliminate the conception of self, you will vow to realize its cessation, which is also the cessation of suffering. Once you find out what the origin is, you will want it, and understand it, you will want to end it. You will want to end the afflictions, you will want to end the suffering, you will want to end the conception of self, because that's what brings about the suffering that you want to end. And so that's the origin of what you want to end. So then we get into a debate. And where it says quam here, if we look at the Tibetan word is a word that's very similar to another word that's used in texts, and that would be translated like some say, or some assert. So if you read it like that, some assert if teaching the truth of suffering promotes the desire for liberation, should not the Buddha have taught the truth of cessation immediately after teaching the truth of suffering? So that's how the debate would begin. Some say this, and then there would be a response, and in this case Geshe Rinpoche gives the response to what some say, to negate what they are saying, to clear away the misconception that's being presented. Digsung Rinpoche.
That the land is what Rinpoche land, Jun Metis, teaches, Dongan Sundu Lord, Dongan Tantric, the Yungo, and Tabatunyalu Seniba Radio, my teacher, Dongan Shi, Gopala, Gobala Tona Champi Tando Yue Jans, Dungashi and Gobatona never Tando Yue Jan, Dungaji Junga Sayo Mares, Dungaji Jokunu de Bango Sayo Mares, Mazinji, Jude Dunus Maton Yue, Gobango to Shawa, Shawo Janto, Tabala, Toja Mendishirosa. What did Dunga Juda Jiba? Pombi Tabatona what did Tojate Zengu Mares, Dunga Jungu Mares, Dunga Judunus or Maton Way, Gobango to Shawo Janto, Tabala Toja Mendishirosa. What Lanchi Marba?
So the first response that Lama Tsongkhapa makes is as follows. There is no mistake. Why, at this point, after you recognize the truth of suffering, you have a desire for liberation and think, if only I could attain a cessation that relieves this suffering. But if you have not identified the cause of suffering, and have not seen that you can eliminate that cause, you do not yet regard liberation as something attainable, and thus do not think, I will realize a cessation. So in terms of order of practice, this is the reason it is placed there, because there are these pre-steps, these pre-requirements that have to be in place in order for you to actually believe in the possibility of this cessation, to believe it.
Tada Tabala and Gobang Tabala Gobang Shao Nyabi Zemba na what did Tabato and Yabatak doing the Kunju and doing Judan Jibal Tana Yabi and Jusamba Tabatun de Guru Chonsuna and Tabato Balavati Jukma in Yabin and London Leonis, Jibat the London Leonis, larger than Basons.
In this way, when you do think I shall realize the cessation that is liberation, you become interested in the truth of path, wondering about the path that leads to this cessation. For this reason, the Buddha spoke about the truth of the path last. The reason for this is, once you realize there is this suffering, this is what causes it, I want to be free from it, then you begin to wonder, how does that take place? What are the things that I have to do in order to achieve cessation of these things, in order to abandon suffering? And that is why then the truth of path is presented at that point, because then that truth of path is how one eliminates the cause, eliminates the origin of suffering.
What that or long drovers, then the table tatu lamale, then the shares and education and shares with shares on beige, long drawing orders, Josh and long drovers, they would the long day should go to the shares on they should ma rebel drawing orders. Jeremy Chelon, the Rebani, go there, the end of a cunu deba, and the Sanji with the Sumba there, long drew down that do. One judge about the Nan she just said a long doos, that I will long to Woodle and Riba drew those Riba. Or the Kun Keba Chevro, the German she go there, long the Riba drew at the Kuala to water. And then I saw Tungo Deba to the man and Nazukarashida.
So we find then a quote from Lord Maitreya's Sublime Continuum. And there's so many points and implicit information within this. Without a commentary, to really dissect this would be difficult without it. And just as a translator's note, this is very readable in English. It has been converted into something that's very easy, much easier to read than the Tibetan is presented, if that makes any sense. So as a Tibetan reader, this would be very, very difficult to find out exactly what the points are, because a lot of it's much more condensed and using more rarer language in some cases that you have to figure out what it means. And it's been presented in English in a very palatable way, in a way that is very easy to understand. So if you're thinking as a reader, this seems like it's not as complex. It's been made easier in the English in some ways. So if you were to take the raw Tibetan text and just translate it word for word in English, you wouldn't come up with this very clear way of understanding it. So that's just a translator's note for anybody who's watching or listening, and at times wondering why some of this seems like it isn't as difficult. It's because it's been made easier in some ways by the translation. So the Sublime Continuum states, so this section is the section where Lama Tsongkhapa does the proof by two ways. Proof by way of scripture, and then proof by way of signs and reasoning or analysis. So he uses Lord Maitreya's Sublime Continuum for the proof by scripture, and then the next part shows the analysis section, or the how one would look at it according to using correct signs or correct proofs. So the Four Noble Truths are in the order of the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, the truth of path, because Lord Maitreya's text, Sublime Continuum, presents them in that way. Recognize that you are ill. Eliminate the cause of the illness. Attain health. Rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively. So this is the scriptural proof.
다 대화상에 어때 담바지들 뽀뽀지송도 동에 담바 내다버스 내는 셰자스 캔시 TV라 소비 나사다버스 담바 내는 셰자 내지죠 너 군주 담바 내가 준다버스 example 안에 드네 도자 안에 내든 해칸 해되는 trason 도와요로다 어때 고된다버스 팬데버 샤와터에 what the landed the hand up marbe
lesser
what the landed the hand up is
lesser
then the sheja net jun bonjalo kunju and then the tojon gode pen the bashawa the landed what the push jawasha be push to ne then sondu zeta kuzu sabat lo de jilana sabayina what the nen sheja sondu kensi da dogen de ba de kensi de jebila sube nasa namores Kunjuto nega jundamuris, and the Hensan net of the water Gudendamuris, or the Dungete Nasat trouble of Hente or Hendelandamuris. Then it was a low.
So the Sublime Continuum states, recognize that you are ill, eliminate the cause of the illness, attain health, rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively. So recognizing that you're ill, someone recognizes that he or she has an illness or disease. This illness is an example that's used to understand the truth of suffering. Recognizing that you're suffering, recognizing that you are sick, that you are ill. Eliminate the cause of the illness is referring to the truth of origin causes the illness. So you would go to a doctor, and he or she would say, "Oh, this is what's causing your sickness. This is what the cause of it is." Attain health, achieve wellness. This is an example that's used to understand the truth of cessation. If one goes to the doctor and then is given medication and takes it, then he or she will attain health, will cure his or her illness. So this is compared to the truth of cessation, the cessation of suffering. And then rely on a remedy is an example used to understand the truth of path. So here this remedy would be, for instance, if you go to the doctor and he or she gives you a specific medication for cancer or for tuberculosis, and you take this medication and then you'll be free of your illness. The relying on a remedy is similar to the path that one engages in order to achieve that cessation of suffering. So Lord Maitreya uses these 4 examples, the actual illness, the cause of an illness, the achieving health, and relying on a remedy to the cause of the truth of suffering, origin, cessation, and path. Digsun. So now we'll get into the analysis, the correct signs, proofs. So this being the case, the 4 truths are taught repeatedly throughout the Mahayana and the Hinayana. So in looking at these 4 superior truths, we find this cause and effect relationship that they have with one another. If we group them, we show one group is how one is bound to cyclic existence, and then the other grouping showing how one is unbound from cyclic existence or freed from cyclic existence. So the truth of suffering and origin show how one is bound to cyclic existence or kept in cyclic existence, and truth of path and truth of cessation show how one is freed from, unbound from cyclic existence. So it's very important to understand that about these 4 superior truths, as they are, no matter what vehicle we find the presentation of these 4 truths, whether it's Hinayana or Mahayana. Digsun.
What the core Jubatan, Teledubi Nena, Dawashibi, Duba Yimbis, Dawashiba Sanji Somebody's, Duba Yimbi, and Dore the Bakundu, the Bangodan, then what the Sombate, Nandu Tabaduba, Shira Ketchup, Shindu Ketchup, Ketchin, Nyalenji, Gadun, Chevi, Zimbata Tato. Less so. Since
the Sugata has included in the 4 truths the vital points concerning the process of cyclic existence and its cessation, this teaching is crucial for achieving freedom. Since this synoptic outline of practice is important, it must be taught to students in just this order. The Sugata is referring to the Buddha. So Lord Buddha has taught these 4 superior truths in this order because it is Shintuke Chenpo, extremely important for achieving liberation. So this process of practice in this order is extremely important in one's, I don't want to use the word journey, or one's process to liberation, the process to enlightenment. The word enlightenment's fine, or liberation. Then that's it. Digsun.
Chi good this. Donge Sambi Gune, then Donge about Tombusone, Donge Sambi Gune, call a Shenlus, Nemashi, Menas, Donge Sambi Gune, call a Shendu Tabatunde Samba, Nemashi Meba, Juma Maiba, Meba Ina, Taba Tundu Season to use, Taba Tuban Devas use, Sazamatu, Taba Tuning Lungana Yumares. 7章中主于积极工作中说流动阿给学不跟个罗的呢工作的不讲那个意思
流动啊
流学不阿给学不跟个罗工作的不讲那个意思工作中说拉啥工作上比过呢六年年没上了嘛那他把东西没有得的这么对 도대 예매서 마비나 동에 잡아서 그네 어디 타봤더니 동에 잡아도 걸 맞대나 어디 타봤더니 좀 저거 말이에요.
Lasso.
그중 그냥 조리 마서나 그저 주주시에 말이에요. 어디 리바가 두아도 빌라리 되는 레드면 돼.
Lasso. So why? So it says taught to students in just this order. Why? Unless you reflect on the truth of suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. And whatever you will do will lead to origins of further suffering. Unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is karma and the afflictions, you will be like an archer who does not see the target. You will miss the essential points of the path. You will mistake what is not a path to freedom from cyclic existence for the path and exhaust yourself without result. And finally, if you fail to understand the need to eliminate suffering and its origin, you will fail to recognize the liberation that provides relief from suffering and its origin. Hence, your interest in liberation will be a mere conceit. So here we find points that are very similar to the points made in the abbreviated stages of the path. Unless you reflect on the truth of suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. In the Lamrim Duden, or abbreviated stages, it says, if you do not make an effort to think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. If you do not consider the stages whereby true origins of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious cycle. So we find in these points the same points that Lama Tsongkhapa makes in the smaller Lamrim. Diksun.
Oh, this way. Oh, that do. Tene kunyu sambi gune ku tsawa le dan nyomo ba na leba ma shena so kunyu sambi gune ne ku tsawa le dan nyomo ba tu ya ba ma shena be ma tu da phen ba tar la jine na che shin Shibali tree, Lama Ibala Zone, Nakali Kazi Jaba in Nakali Jaba to me Chandores, go on the room of a Jewish dance. Ponja doing machine, Ponja doing the machine, then Yawashi, and then Taba on one Mazimbe, Taba Tenizulu, Lumba Santo, Sebishero, the town, the Bundusu town, the good Ramada.
So this section deals with the presentation of correct sign. Why, unless you reflect on the truth of suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. And whatever you do will lead to origins of further suffering. Unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is the karma and afflictions, you will be like an archer who does not see the target. You will miss the essential points of the path. You will mistake what is not a path to freedom from cyclic existence for the path and exhaust yourself without result. Finally, if you fail to understand the need to eliminate suffering and its origin, you will also fail to recognize the liberation that provides relief from suffering and its origin. Hence, your interest in liberation will be mere conceit. So you recognize suffering, and then what is the origin of suffering? We find the origin of suffering are the karma and the afflictions. If you don't get rid of the karma and the afflictions, and you don't know that those are what are needed to be gotten rid of, then you won't be able to achieve the state of liberation, because you won't engage in the practices that lead to that goal. You'll miss the target altogether, because you aren't getting rid of what needs to be gotten rid of because of not recognizing how it comes about and the way out of it in the proper way.
All the days, Thomas about the Dongan Gomba Marba. That Dongan Gomba to Lendro, Niba Dongan Gomba to La Koashi dunga sambatan, susu dunga samba sajini duwa. Koashi dunga sambatan, susu dunga samba ni je. Ta koashi dunga sambatala sun dunga je samba, zhu samba, sun samba, wadi ka sun duwa, ka sun. Wadi sonji na nga zu ka le unima
Okay. So now we get to the next section, which is the actual meditation on suffering. There are two categories, the reflection on the universal suffering of cyclic existence and then reflection on specific suffering. So in this section, we get into the various categories of suffering, 8 categories of suffering, 6 categories of suffering, 3 categories of suffering. So in the future classes, we'll get into this part.
Jita dunga ji samba tamba wata shedding terendo shedding. Tamba na shedding les tebin debi pongtang chewa tang gadang nasu dunga toma yi nyone la ne pyunze jin sa she song batara dunga gongba wos tala kwa la chua gongba ne Duden to me, Junen so Samba, Junen Samba Osa, Junen Samba Os, Tadungen and Debi Pomba La Soba, Monsu Temba Jetan, and Sude Duba Jet Jed or Tres, she didn't want to get Monsu Temba Jet, and the Shula Temba Jet J.
So we have the outline with the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering, and then when we get first category reflection on the 8 types of suffering, we immediately have a quote from Nagarjuna's friendly letter. It says, "Your Highness, be disenchanted with cyclic existence, which is the origin of many sufferings, being deprived of what you want, death, illness, old age, and so on." Here, this begins the order of the various types of suffering that are presented according to 8. Here, cultivating a sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence means reflecting on its origin of many suffering. The 8 types of suffering include the 4 that Nagarjuna states explicitly, being deprived of what one wants and so on forth, as well as the 4 that are indicated by words and so on. The Bhagavan taught these 8 in many discourses when he identified the truth of suffering. So Nagarjuna presents these 4, and then implicitly we know that there are those other 4 by that and so on part, because these are the first 4 of the 8. Being deprived of what you want, death, illness, old age, and then it says and so on. We know that there are the 4 more to be presented.
What she did is Tebas had what the Mumulu the Kumper Jabudis and Bulbaris and Burba. And the Tebas and what the Mumulu and Jabudis and Burbaris, Burby series, Tebas and Burba.
So Nagarjuna's friendly letter is a letter of advice to a king named King Geshe Lharampa. So this is being written to a king. So it says, "Your Highness," and that's the reason for this.
Depuis longtemps, j'ai vu donner Dieu dans Chile. What the depuis on peut dire j'en manière de donner de what the thing we are is. Depuis longtemps, depuis on peut dire j'en manière de donner. Tenez chi donner, naï donner, gaï donner je. On se tient pas je. On est sur le temps pas je de what there is. Moi d'un je de consulter là jana.
Your Highness, be disenchanted with cyclic existence, which is the origin of many sufferings. So then the list of 8 begins. The first, being deprived of what you want. Second, death. Third, illness. Fourth, old age. And so on is referring to also, and so on refers to those other 4, which make for a total of 8.
Oh, that's what they do. But what the chi doing, and then Muduba the tribute Duba the trade doing, or the Sajin Yon and Pomunga doing was what the shit is. Chi doing, ane muduba the tribute duba the trade doing sajin yohana bunga doing je mozu tempa je shula tempa je
so how do we come to 8? So we have first being deprived of what you want, second death, third illness, fourth old age. So we have to add on fifth birth, sixth suffering, encountering what is unpleasant, seventh the suffering of separation from what is pleasant, and then number 8 the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. The 5 aggregates were forced into the 5 appropriated aggregates. So these are the 8. And just as a note, the order that I just gave them in was just looking at the friendly letter and then adding the other 4. That's not the order that's in the exact way that we find in Lama Tsongkhapa's outline. Dixon. So in the future we'll go over these 8 types of suffering. So we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. And thank you everyone for coming. I had a prayer book. The one in front. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance.